The quantum anomaly arrived like a silent predator, a shimmering fracture in the fabric of reality that defied every known scientific principle. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched the holographic display's pulse with impossible data, her dark eyes reflecting cascading mathematical sequences that threatened to drive even the most stable mind to madness. Around her, the Quantum Resilience Station, a massive orbital research complex disguised as a standard deep space research facility, hummed with an electricity of pure, unrestrained panic. Most of humanity's scientific elite had already retreated to underground bunkers or isolated research compounds, but Elena and her team were different. Where others saw an insurmountable cosmic barrier, they saw the ultimate challenge. The anomaly had struck simultaneously across every known spacefaring civilization. Quantum constants that had been immutable for billions of years suddenly began to shift, collapse, and reconstruct themselves in patterns that defied all existing mathematical models. Within hours of the initial detection, most alien species had begun broadcasting their surrender. "We're receiving the final transmissions from the Centauri Concordance," Marcus Chen announced, his voice a controlled monotone that barely masked his underlying excitement. A holographic display flickered to life, showing representatives of dozens of alien species capitulating to the universe's new, seemingly impossible constraints. The Jareen Diplomatic Corps looked particularly defeated. Their crystalline communication arrays displayed a complex language of light and geometric patterns that now showed only a dull, defeated gray. The silicon-based intelligence networks of the Quantum Collective were simply going dark, one by one, their computational matrices unable to process the fundamental changes. But humanity was just getting started. Elena moved between the research stations, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. Each workstation represented a different approach to understanding the anomaly. To her left, quantum physicists worked to map the new reality. To her right, theoretical mathematicians attempted to create predictive models that could explain the impossible. Aisha O'Keefe, a quantum engineer whose previous work had been considered too radical for mainstream science, looked up from her station. "The constraint isn't just a limitation," she said, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos. "It's a complete restructuring of physical law. Every technological foundation we've built is about to become obsolete." Most teams would have seen this as a death sentence, but not this team. Not humanity. "We're not going extinct," Elena declared, her voice carrying a steel that seemed to push back against the very fabric of reality. "We're going to understand this. We're going to break it." Marcus Chen let out a dark chuckle. He pulled up a series of complex quantum calculations that would have looked like pure nonsense to anyone else. "The universe thinks it can stop us. Watch this." The station's primary quantum resonance chamber began to hum, a sound that was more felt than heard. It was a low, almost sentient vibration that seemed to challenge the very notion of limitation. Outside the reinforced windows, Earth hung like a blue-green spark of defiance. A single planet preparing to wage war against cosmic determinism. "Preliminary data is insane," Aisha muttered, her fingers moving faster than seemed humanly possible across her interface. "The new constraints should make faster-than-light travel impossible. Energy production should be reduced to near-zero efficiency. Our entire technological infrastructure should collapse." Elena walked to the station's primary viewing window. The stars outside seemed different now, dimmer, more fragile, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. "Should is a fascinating word," she said quietly. "It implies a choice." The team around her worked with a manic intensity that blurred the line between genius and madness. Coffee machines ran continuously. Nutrient packs were consumed without pause. Communication with ground control had become sporadic, with most governmental and scientific institutions believing this was humanity's final hour. They didn't understand. This wasn't an ending. This was the beginning of something extraordinary. Marcus looked up from his calculations, a dangerous glint in his eye. "We're going to turn this constraint inside out," he said. It wasn't a boast. It was a promise. Outside, the universe continued its silent transformation. But inside the quantum resilience station, humanity was preparing its response. They would not go quietly. They would not surrender. They would fight. The first month of research was a crucible of innovation that defied every known scientific protocol. The quantum resilience station had transformed from a research facility into a battlefield, a place where humanity waged war against the fundamental laws of existence. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched another prototype disintegrate in a cascade of quantum interference. The experimental quantum drive erupted into a spectacular display of mathematical impossibility. Fractal patterns of energy that shouldn't exist, couldn't exist, and yet manifested with brutal clarity. Most scientific teams would have been crushed by the continuous failures. Her team saw each explosion as a data point, each catastrophic collapse as another piece of the cosmic puzzle. Another one for the collection, Marcus Chen remarked, capturing the drive's destruction in a three-dimensional quantum signature map. His workstation was a mosaic of failed attempts, each represented by intricate holographic models that pulsed with impossible geometries. Where other researchers saw defeat, Marcus saw a challenge waiting to be dismantled. Aisha O'Keefe moved between experimental stations with a predatory focus. Her latest project, a quantum resonance chamber designed to probe the new universal limitations, looked more like an art installation than a scientific instrument. Liquid metal conduits twisted in impossible configurations, quantum-entangled crystals suspended in magnetic fields that defied traditional understanding of matter and energy. "We're not just fighting physical constraints," Aisha explained during a rare moment of rest, her voice carrying the intensity of a revolutionary. "We're challenging the very concept of limitation. Every failed experiment is a window into how the universe might have constructed its new rule set." The station's alien observation team, a group of scientific attaches from various galactic civilizations, watched with a mixture of horror and fascination. The Jareen representative, a crystalline being whose entire body was a living computational matrix, continuously transmitted reports back to its home civilization. Each transmission carried an undertone of growing unease. Humanity was doing something unprecedented. They weren't just trying to survive the universal constraint. They were attempting to understand it, to break it, to remake it in their image. A new prototype emerged from the fabrication lab, a quantum communication array that looked like a nightmare birthed from the marriage of advanced mathematics and pure artistic rebellion. Traditional communication protocols had collapsed under the new universal constraints. Most civilizations had gone silent, accepting their technological death sentence. Not humanity. "Incoming test," Marcus announced, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. The communication array began to hum, a sound that was more felt than heard. It was a vibration that seemed to challenge the very concept of silence. Elena watched the initial data streams with hawk-like intensity. The first attempts were predictably catastrophic. Communication packets dissolved into pure mathematical noise, quantum entanglement patterns fragmenting into nonsensical sequences. But each failure revealed something new, something tantalizing. "There's a pattern here," Aisha muttered, pulling up complex analytical models. "These aren't just random failures. The universe is trying to tell us something." The observation team from the Quantum Collective, Silicon-based intelligences who had previously considered humanity a minor, almost irrelevant species, began to recalibrate their understanding. Their communication networks showed increasing levels of what could only be described as anxiety. Humanity was hunting for weakness in the universal constraint, and they were getting closer. A breakthrough came during the 37th consecutive day of testing. The quantum communication array suddenly produced a signal. Brief, fragmented, but undeniably coherent. It lasted less than a microsecond, but it was enough. "Got you," Marcus whispered, a predatory smile spreading across his face. The signal was more than just a communication attempt. It was a message, a challenge. Proof that the universal constraint was not an immutable law, but a complex system waiting to be understood. Elena studied the data, her mind racing through potential implications. "We're not just fighting for survival," she said quietly. "We're fighting to understand, to expand the boundaries of what's possible." Outside the station's reinforced windows, Earth continued its silent orbit. Humanity's home planet had always been a spark of defiance in the cosmic darkness. Now that defiance was becoming something more. A weapon, a tool, a key to rewriting the universe's fundamental rules. The universal constraint thought it had humanity cornered. It was about to learn how wrong it was. The breakthrough came like a thunderbolt of scientific revelation, unexpected and earth-shattering. Dr. Aisha O'Keefe's hands moved with a precision that bordered on the supernatural, her fingers dancing across quantum interfaces that seemed to pulse with living energy. The experimental quantum resonance chamber, a device that had consumed 3 years of her life, and the collective resources of humanity's most advanced research facilities, hummed with an intensity that made the very air vibrate. "Incoming quantum cascade," she muttered, more to herself than to the team around her. "Probability matrices are impossible." The chamber looked nothing like traditional scientific equipment. Liquid metal conduits twisted in configurations that would have been considered pure madness just months earlier. Quantum-entangled crystals hung suspended in magnetic fields that defied every known principle of material science. It was less a piece of scientific equipment, and more a cathedral built to worship the impossible. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from the observation deck, her breath caught in her throat. They had been here before, countless times. Each previous attempt had ended in spectacular failure, with prototype systems dissolving into pure mathematical noise or exploding in cascades of impossible energy. But this time felt different. Marcus Chen's voice cut through the tension. "Quantum coherence is stabilizing," he announced, his voice a mixture of scientific detachment and barely contained excitement. "We're seeing patterns that shouldn't exist. The universal constraint isn't just a limitation. It's a complex adaptive system." The alien observation teams positioned throughout the quantum resilience station went absolutely still. Representatives from a dozen galactic civilizations watched through reinforced observation windows, their various biological and computational systems struggling to process what they were witnessing. The Jareen Diplomatic Observer, a being composed of interconnected crystalline matrices that served as both body and computational network, began transmitting a continuous stream of data back to its home civilization. Its communication patterns suggested something close to panic. Humanity was doing the unthinkable. They were not just challenging the universal constraint. They were beginning to understand it. "Cascade initiating," Aisha called out. The quantum resonance chamber began to pulse with a light that was more than light, a manifestation of pure mathematical possibility. Colors that had no right to exist danced across its surface. Probability waves collapsed and reformed in patterns that would have driven most scientific minds to madness. Elena gripped the observation deck's railing. This was more than an experiment. This was a rebellion against the fundamental structure of reality itself. The chamber's quantum interfaces began to produce data streams that defied comprehension. Where most scientific teams would have been overwhelmed, this team saw opportunity. Each impossible reading was a window into a new understanding of the universe. "We're seeing quantum interference patterns that suggest the constraint is adaptive," Marcus explained, pulling up holographic displays that looked more like living art than scientific data. "It's not a hard limit. It's a complex system that can be manipulated, potentially even circumvented." Outside the station's reinforced windows, the stars seemed to dim, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The alien observation teams began to transmit urgent communications. The quantum collective's silicon-based intelligence networks were going into what could only be described as a computational panic. Humanity was doing something that violated every known principle of scientific understanding. They were finding a way out. Suddenly, the quantum resonance chamber erupted in a burst of energy that was simultaneously sound, light, and pure mathematical possibility. Aisha's initial calculations suggested it was impossible. The energy readings were beyond anything previously recorded. "Got you," she whispered. The universal constraint had just met its match. In that moment, everything changed. The universe had thrown down its ultimate challenge. Humanity had not just accepted the challenge. They were about to rewrite the very rules of existence. And they were just getting started. The prototypes emerged from humanity's research facilities like weapons of cosmic defiance. Each technological marvel was a middle finger to the universal constraint, a declaration that humanity would not be bound by impossible limitations. The first breakthrough came with the quantum communicator, a device that should have been mathematically impossible. Dr. Marcus Chen presented it during an emergency global scientific conference, his presentation broadcast across what remained of human communication networks and alien observation channels. Traditional communication protocols collapsed under the new universal constraints, Marcus explained, his voice calm and razor-sharp. Most civilizations accepted this as an insurmountable barrier. We saw it as an invitation. The device looked like a work of art more than scientific equipment. Liquid metal circuits formed intricate patterns that seemed to shift and breathe. Quantum-entangled crystals pulsed with an inner light that defied conventional understanding of matter and energy. When activated, it transmitted a signal across 3 star systems. Instantaneously, the reaction was immediate and global. Alien diplomatic channels erupted in a frenzy of communication. The quantum collective's silicon-based intelligence networks began transmitting what could only be described as computational panic. Representatives from dozens of galactic civilizations watched in a mixture of terror and fascination as humanity demonstrated technologies that should have been pure fantasy. But the quantum communicator was just the beginning. Dr. Aisha O'Keefe's experimental energy converter was perhaps even more revolutionary. Positioned in a secured research facility deep within the Australian outback, the device pulled energy from what should have been absolute zero, a point where all molecular motion was supposed to cease. Energy production should have been reduced to near-zero efficiency, Aisha explained during a classified briefing. The universal constraints suggested that our entire technological infrastructure would collapse. She paused, a dangerous smile playing across her lips. We found another way. The energy converter looked like a nightmare birthed from the marriage of advanced mathematics and pure artistic rebellion. Superconducting coils formed impossible geometric patterns. Quantum-entangled materials created energy gradients that violated every known principle of thermodynamics. When activated, it generated power equivalent to a small fusion reactor, but with zero emissions, zero waste, and energy drawn from what physics had previously considered an impossible source. Dr. Elena Rodriguez oversaw the broader strategic implementation. While individual researchers like Marcus and Aisha pushed the boundaries of scientific understanding, she coordinated the global effort. Research facilities around the world worked in synchronized chaos, each team attacking the universal constraint from a different angle. The planetary defense networks began to reconfigure. Communication systems were rebuilt using the new quantum technologies. Energy grids were transformed. Humanity was not just surviving the universal constraint. They were using it as a stepping stone to something greater. Alien observation teams watched with growing terror. The Jareen Diplomatic Corps, a civilization of crystalline computational beings, began emergency sessions to discuss the human threat. Their communication networks buzzed with a single fundamental question: how could a species so young, so seemingly primitive, be producing technologies that defied the fundamental understanding of reality? They didn't understand. This wasn't just technological innovation. This was a rebellion against the very concept of limitation. A prototype faster-than-light communication array developed in a secured facility in Tokyo demonstrated instantaneous communication across unprecedented distances. The quantum entanglement systems developed by the research team made previous communication technologies look like primitive smoke signals. "We're not just breaking the rules," Marcus said during a private strategy meeting. "We're rewriting them." Each technological breakthrough was a message to the universe, a declaration that humanity would not be constrained, that limitations were nothing more than challenges waiting to be overcome. The universal constraint had thought it could stop humanity. It was about to learn how wrong it was. The emergency session of the Galactic Concordance convened in a moment of unprecedented tension. Holographic representatives from dozens of alien civilizations filled a massive computational chamber that floated in the neutral space between star systems. The air itself seemed charged with a mixture of fear, desperation, and barely contained panic. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of the chamber, a single human amid a sea of alien representatives. Her presentation was a masterpiece of scientific defiance. Each slide a carefully constructed argument that challenged everything the assembled civilizations believed about technological limitations. The Keeler Imperium's reptilian strategists were the first to break the tense silence. Their lead diplomat, a massive creature with scales that shifted color with emotional response, slammed multiple appendages against the holographic interface. Human intervention must be stopped. The translation matrix carried a tone of absolute desperation. Your technological developments threaten the fundamental stability of galactic existence. Elena didn't flinch. She had been preparing for this moment her entire career. "We're not a threat," she responded, her voice cutting through alien babble translators with surgical precision. "We're an opportunity. The universal constraint isn't a limitation. It's a puzzle waiting to be solved." The Silicon Collective's representative, a being composed of interconnected computational matrices, began transmitting a continuous stream of data that suggested something close to computational panic. Its light-based communication patterns flickered rapidly, suggesting multiple simultaneous thought processes struggling to comprehend humanity's technological breakthrough. Marcus Chen stood just behind Elena, monitoring the real-time data feeds. Each alien response was another piece of information, another window into understanding their collective psychology. Where most would have seen a diplomatic confrontation, he saw a complex mathematical problem waiting to be solved. "Your technologies violate every known principle of quantum mechanics," the Jareen Diplomatic Corps argued, their crystalline communication arrays displaying complex geometric patterns of concern. "You are destabilizing the fundamental understanding of physical law." Elena's next slide showed a comprehensive breakdown of humanity's technological developments. Quantum communicators that transmitted information instantaneously, energy converters that generated power from what should have been absolute zero, communication systems that defied every known limitation. "We're not destroying physical law," she explained. "We're expanding our understanding of it." The chamber went silent. Some alien representatives began discussing military intervention. The Keeler Imperium's war strategists proposed a complete computational and technological isolation of human research zones. The Silicon Collective suggested using their most advanced computational weapons to neutralize human research facilities. But beneath the bluster, there was something else, something the alien civilizations didn't want to admit. They were afraid, not just of humanity's technologies, but of what those technologies represented. Hope. Aisha O'Keefe, monitoring the conference remotely from the Quantum Resilience Station, watched the proceedings with a mixture of scientific curiosity and barely contained excitement. Each alien response was another data point, another piece of the complex puzzle humanity was solving. "They don't understand," she muttered to herself. "We're not just breaking rules. We're showing everyone how to look at them differently." The conference continued for hours. Diplomatic channels buzzed with increasingly desperate communications. Emergency sessions were called on hundreds of alien homeworlds. Military strategists developed increasingly complex plans to contain the human threat. But underneath it all, a fundamental truth was becoming clear. Humanity wasn't just challenging the universal constraint. They were offering a way forward for every civilization that had given up hope. The universe had thrown down its ultimate challenge. Humanity was about to show everyone how to win. The final breakthrough came during what seemed like a routine experiment, a moment so profound it would rewrite the fundamental understanding of existence itself. Dr. Aisha O'Cake's hands moved with a precision that bordered on the mystical. The quantum cascade generator, a device that had consumed years of research, billions in funding, and the collective imagination of humanity's most brilliant minds, hummed with an energy that made the very fabric of reality seem to tremble. The quantum resilience station had been transformed. What was once a standard research facility now looked like a cathedral of scientific rebellion. Liquid metal conduits twisted in configurations that would have driven traditional physicists to madness. Quantum-entangled crystals hung suspended in magnetic fields that defied every known principle of material science. Initiating cascade sequence, Aisha announced, her voice calm despite the magnitude of what was about to happen. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from the primary observation deck, her entire body tense with anticipation. Marcus Chen stood beside her, his fingers hovering over a complex array of monitoring systems. The alien observation teams, representatives from dozens of galactic civilizations, watched through reinforced windows, their various biological and computational systems struggling to process the imminent event. The universal constraint had been more than a mere physical limitation. It was a complex quantum lock that had brought nearly every advanced civilization to its knees. Humanity was about to find the key. The first signs were subtle. A quantum interference pattern that shouldn't have been possible began to emerge. Mathematical sequences that defied existing models of physics started to cascade through the experimental chamber. The liquid metal conduits began to shift, forming geometries that existed somewhere between possibility and pure mathematical abstraction. Quantum coherence is stabilizing, Marcus called out, his voice a mixture of scientific detachment and barely contained excitement. We're seeing probability waves that have no right to exist. The Jareen Diplomatic Observer, a beam composed of interconnected crystalline matrices, began transmitting a continuous stream of data that suggested pure computational panic. Its communication patterns flickered rapidly, struggling to comprehend what was unfolding. Suddenly, everything changed. The quantum cascade generator erupted in a burst of energy that was simultaneously light, sound, and pure mathematical possibility. Colors that had no right to exist danced across its surface. Probability waves collapsed and reformed in patterns that would have driven most scientific minds to total incomprehension. Faster-than-light travel became not just possible, but almost trivially simple. Energy production scaled to levels that made previous technological achievements look like primitive campfires. Communication systems transformed, allowing instantaneous transmission across impossible distances. We're not just breaking the rules, Aisha whispered, her eyes reflecting the impossible energies dancing around her. We're rewriting them. The universal constraint wasn't a hard limit. It was a complex adaptive system, and humanity had just found its fundamental weakness. Alien observation teams went absolutely still. The quantum collective's silicon-based intelligence networks began transmitting what could only be described as a collective gasp of comprehension. Diplomatic channels across the galaxy erupted in a frenzy of communication. Elena stepped forward, her hand reaching out to touch a holographic display that now showed possibilities beyond anything previously imagined. "We did it," she said quietly. But it was more than a statement of scientific achievement. It was a declaration of something much larger. Humanity had been presented with an impossible challenge, and they had not just survived. They had transformed it. Marcus Chen looked at the data streams with a predatory smile. Each impossible reading was a window into a new understanding of the universe. "We're not done," he said. "We're just getting started." Outside the station's reinforced windows, the stars seemed to dim, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The universal constraint had thrown down its ultimate challenge. Humanity had not just accepted the challenge. They had rewritten the very rules of existence. The transformation was not what anyone expected. Humanity did not conquer. They explored. They shared. They demonstrated that their victory was about understanding, not domination. The first wave of human expeditions moved through the galaxy like a renaissance of possibility, where previous civilizations had been crushed by the universal constraint. Human ships moved with a grace and curiosity that defied every existing model of exploration. Dr. Elena Rodriguez led the diplomatic corps, her role extending far beyond traditional scientific leadership. She was part ambassador, part translator of human potential to civilizations that had long since given up hope. Their first major contact came with the crystalline networks of the Jareen, a civilization that had been essentially paralyzed by the universal constraint. Human researchers arrived not with weapons or demands, but with comprehensive research detailing how the constraint could be understood, manipulated, potentially even overcome. "We're not here to replace your technologies," Elena explained during the initial diplomatic session. The Jareen Diplomatic Corps, beings composed of interconnected crystalline matrices, listened with a combination of terror and desperate hope. "We're here to show you another way of looking at the problem." Dr. Marcus Chen accompanied the first research teams. Where traditional diplomacy ended, scientific collaboration began. He worked alongside Jareen computational experts, breaking down the complex quantum mechanisms that had previously seemed insurmountable. Aisha O'Keefe's quantum communication technologies became the foundation of a new galactic information network. Devices that once seemed like pure scientific fantasy now connected civilizations that had been isolated for generations. Instantaneous communication became not just possible, but standard. The transformation was subtle at first. Research stations began to appear on worlds that had been considered technological graveyards. Civilizations that had surrendered to the universal constraint began to reawaken. Human teams didn't impose solutions. They offered pathways, collaborative approaches, a fundamental reimagining of what was possible. The Quantum Collective, a vast network of silicon-based intelligences, was the next to experience human scientific collaboration. Their computational networks, which had been essentially frozen by the constraint, began to expand in ways they had never imagined possible. "We're not solving your problems," Marcus would explain during collaborative sessions. "We're showing you how to see them differently." Not every civilization immediately embraced human assistance. The Keeler Imperium, the reptilian species that had once advocated for humanity's total isolation, remained initially resistant. But even they could not ignore the fundamental changes happening across the galaxy. Energy production was revolutionized. Planets that had been considered uninhabitable became potential homes. Communication networks connected civilizations that had been isolated for millennia. The universal constraint, once seen as an immutable law, was now understood as a complex system waiting to be understood. Humanity didn't present itself as a savior. They were partners, collaborators, a species that had learned that the greatest victories come not from conquest, but from understanding. Research facilities became the new diplomatic compounds. Scientific collaboration replaced military posturing. The galaxy was relearning how to hope. The alien civilizations began to understand something profound about humanity. This wasn't about technological superiority. This was about a fundamental approach to existence, a belief that no limitation was truly absolute. Elena Rodriguez reflected on this during a quiet moment aboard a research vessel. The stars outside seemed different now, more alive, more full of possibility. "We didn't break the universe," she told her team. "We just showed everyone how to look at it differently." The universal constraint had been humanity's ultimate challenge. They had not just survived. They had transformed an entire galactic understanding of what was possible. And they were just getting started. 5 years after the initial breakthrough, the galaxy looked fundamentally different. Human research teams worked alongside representatives from dozens of civilizations. The fear that had once dominated galactic interactions was replaced by a sense of collaborative possibility. The universe had thrown down its worst challenge at humanity. Humanity had responded by rewriting the definition of possible. 10 years after the quantum breakthrough, humanity had transformed from a species on the brink of extinction to the catalyst of a galactic renaissance. The Quantum Exploration Initiative headquarters orbited a specially constructed research planet, a massive spherical structure that was part scientific facility, part diplomatic nexus, part living testament to what was possible when civilizations worked together. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the central observation deck, watching a holographic display that showed collaborative research projects spanning hundreds of star systems. She was no longer just a scientist or a diplomat. She had become something more, a bridge between what was and what could be. Dr. Marcus Chen approached, his latest research data dancing across a quantum-entangled display. "We're not done," he said, a familiar spark of defiance in his eyes. "We've only begun to understand the possibilities." Nearby, Dr. Aisha O'Keefe worked with a team of researchers from 12 different alien civilizations. What had once been impossible collaboration was now standard practice. Quantum communication arrays allowed instantaneous sharing of research, breaking down the last barriers of scientific isolation. The universal constraint that had once threatened to destroy technological civilization was now understood as a complex, adaptive system. More importantly, it was a challenge, an invitation to explore, to understand, to grow. Humanity's approach had been revolutionary. They didn't conquer. They didn't impose. They invited. Every technological breakthrough was shared. Every scientific discovery was a collaborative effort. The galaxy was relearning how to hope, how to dream, how to push beyond perceived limitations. The Jareen crystalline networks, once on the brink of computational collapse, now led entire sectors of advanced research. The Keeler Imperium's military strategists had transformed into collaborative exploration teams. The Quantum Collective had expanded its understanding of existence in ways that would have been unimaginable a decade earlier. "Remember when they thought we were a threat?" Marcus chuckled, pulling up historical diplomatic recordings. The early fear, the panic, the attempts to isolate humanity seemed almost quaint now. Elena watched a live feed of a research station orbiting a previously uninhabitable planet. Teams from 6 different civilizations worked together, transforming what was once considered a dead world into a potential new home. "We didn't just change technology," she said quietly. "We changed how civilizations think about possibility." The quantum technologies that had once seemed like pure fantasy were now the foundation of galactic infrastructure. Energy production had been revolutionized. Communication was instantaneous. Exploration knew no boundaries. But it wasn't about the technology. It was about the approach. Humanity had shown the galaxy something profound. Limitations were not walls. They were invitations. Challenges were not obstacles. They were opportunities. Aisha joined them, her latest research hologram showing complex quantum interactions that would have been considered impossible a decade ago. "We're mapping entire dimensional structures now," she explained. "Each breakthrough opens up new questions, new possibilities." The research planet itself was a testament to collaborative potential. Sections designed by human architects stood beside areas constructed using Jareen computational principles. Keelar environmental systems merged with human adaptive technologies. It was more than a facility. It was a living representation of what was possible when civilizations looked beyond their differences. "We're not done," Elena said, echoing Marcus's earlier statement. But it wasn't just about scientific exploration. It was a fundamental statement about existence itself. The universe had presented humanity with an impossible challenge. Humanity had not just survived. They had transformed the very concept of limitation. Outside the observation deck, a massive quantum communication array pulsed with energy. Research vessels from dozens of civilizations moved with a grace that would have been impossible a decade earlier. The stars themselves seemed different, brighter, more full of possibility. Marcus looked at Elena and Aisha, the original team that had sparked this transformation. "What should we solve next?" he asked. The universe was listening, and it was waiting. Some would later call it the greatest scientific revolution in galactic history. Humanity simply called it Tuesday.